past growth is not a good indicator of future growth. What are your thoughts around that?
Look, that's true. As a generic statement, that is true. But if the past growth is not a good indicator of future growth, then you would never buy anywhere because every suburb shows some sort of past growth, right? And so, what is the magical formula that you can quickly disappear that past growth, although has happened, but there is more to come? Okay. And so, as I said, when you're looking at the growth that has happened over the last sort of 36 months versus 10 years, an average property over a 10-year in Australian property market would deliver around 5% growth. Okay. And so if a market is really, really hot, you would see the 10-year trend sitting at around 8% or 9%, then you know that this market is saturated. You shouldn't be going back
Mm,
in there. Okay. But when you see the 10-year trend and the 10-year trend still sits at like 3% or 4%, you know that there is more heat that this market has to
yeah,
offer.
there's
And
more.
so
There's
it's not just about the short term, but also looking at the long term. So when you look at the last 2 years and you see that the market has delivered 15% growth or 20% growth, that does not naturally means that you discount the suburb completely. You look at the 10-year trend and say, okay, has it delivered more than 6% growth? And if it has, don't touch it, right? You need to let,
mm,
because ultimately what tends to happen is a lot of suburbs starts getting to its maturity. Once the suburb hits
mm,
its maturity, then any growth that is going to come would be in a much more succinct manner. It would be much more subtle in nature. You wouldn't see $1 million property turning up into $2 million property in 2 years' time. Okay. And so if I take examples of Point Piper, for example, right? And so you don't see, an $8 million property turning into $16 million property in literally a year's time, right? Because these are mature suburbs. The growth happens in a much more subtle manner. Of course, there are
mm,
times where people go crazy and go emotional, and you've seen times like those, but these areas adjust quite quickly as well. And then they come back to the growth trajectory. What we are talking about is affordable pricing points where we are talking about 400, 350 to I would say about 550, 600 price point where the suburb can actually go from 550 to $1 million in literally three years time. And so
yeah.
how do you pick that? How do you go picking those suburbs where that sort of growth is going to come?
Yeah, and I know we're gonna be talking about planning and building approvals and infrastructure as well, because that's one of the things also that can change where you might have a suburb which might have people have had difficulty accessing because of transport or there haven't been any hospitals or schools or whatever that might be, and all of a sudden the government's decided actually we're going to put a new rail out this way, and that's where your what
100%.
the past trends may not be a good indicator of the future trends because there's been this whole lack of access to a particular area that is now being freed up where people have always wanted to.
100%.
So have you seen in your experience, have you seen where traditionally that might be a suburb where, the growth has been, okay. But then with this new infrastructure going in, not necessarily greenfield or growth corridor, but there's new infrastructure going in, that there's then this been a whole shift in the way that that area grows.
Definitely. Definitely. Look, opening up the area to an easier access point basically does wonders for an area. The most recent example for people, again, who are in Melbourne would understand that there is a Northeast Link project that came on, went away, came on, went away. And so they finally started building it up. And so that's the link that connects Northeast to basically Southeast. And so, of course, Southeast is the premium of Melbourne. Everyone wants to live in Southeast or the south of Melbourne. Okay. And so, of course, it would always attract a lot of premium. People chose to live there, but there were a
Mm,
lot of people who were there in Northeast who wanted to work in Southeast or had options to work in Southeast, but they never could go there because it was such a long journey. Even from a train's perspective, you have to come all the way into Melbourne CBD and then go back. From a traffic perspective, all the way into Melbourne CBD, come back. Okay, and
mm,
so the
yeah.
Northeast Link basically reduce that journey or is going to reduce that 55 to an hour journey to like literally 20 minutes journey. And so you saw that northeast or northwest just taking off like crazy. I remember, or I still know that I have two development projects in that area, like around Diamond Creek, Eltham, Greensboro. and we were assuming resales of around $830,000, and the resales on some of these properties are now to around 1.1, 1.15. And I cannot believe how quick the growth has come in some of these areas as people realized that this is what the impact is going to look like. Same with train lines, and so airport rail in Melbourne has done amazingly wonders, right? You look at Sunshine West, Albion,
Yep.
Deer Park. People used to never even talk about these suburbs. And people used to say, "Oh, this is low socioeconomic suburbs," and then all of a sudden, boom, it just went through
Right.
the roof as soon as the government has announced these infrastructure projects. What's important is there are two types of infrastructure projects. There is one infrastructure project that is high impactful, that is going to change the dynamics of the area completely, and then there are second type of infrastructure projects where they are changing a one lane road to a two-lane road, or a two-lane road to a three-lane road. Okay. And so those are not impactful projects. And so when people talk about infrastructure projects, I say to people, look at either high impactful infrastructure projects like building a massive hospital, like Footscray
Yeah.
Hospital. It would do wonders to Maidstone and Braybrook. You would see that coming through. That would just completely change the dynamics of Maidstone and Braybrook. And so impactful infrastructure, or when you're talking about infrastructure, it has to be consistently delivered infrastructure, which basically brings in growth opportunities from population, growth opportunities from jobs. And so people tend to move in these areas because there is consistent infrastructure that is happening in those areas.